February 22, 1944. Inuitak Atoll. First light is a smear of gray behind a haze of diesel smoke and salt. You arrive in the mud and the roar. The sea is a wreck of twisted coral and scattered pontoon sections. Landing craft lie half-buried like beached metal whales. Shellfire has chewed the trees down to splinters. Palm fronds lie black and sticky with oil. Somewhere inland, a siren that used to warn of air raids is buried under a new, stranger noise, the grinding, patient music of engines and gears. Men speak in clipped orders that cut through the shrapnel scratch of birds and the distant, hollow thud of mortars. This is not the sound of an army coming to fight alone. It is a chorus of machines built to remake the world. On the reef, a small group of Japanese sentries stand like statues in the half-dark, their boots caked with coral dust. Lieutenant Sakamoto, hairline scar across his temple, eyes narrowed, watches the first wave with a mix of disbelief and dread. For months, this atoll has been a ring of green jungle and sluggish lagoon, an outpost of coconut groves and narrow trails. Now, from the water, something else is rising. Not only ships and soldiers, but steel plates, bulldozers, and men with hard hats stamped with a smiling B and the letters U.S. Navy, Construction Battalion. They call themselves Seabees. To the Japanese on Inuitak that morning, they are a different kind of invader, one that doesn't just take ground but rewrites it. From the American side, Chief Petty Officer William Bill Hargrove of Construction Battalion 24 stands on the bow of an LST, rain slicking his brow. A scarred man in his late 30s, his hands are already ink-stained from plans and oil-stained from gear. He glances at a crumpled clipboard while the landing craft grinds toward the reef. Around him, his men, welders, equipment operators, surveyors, sling shovels and coils of cable. Their faces are a patchwork of exhaustion and grim focus. They have been training for this for months. They know what the island has to become before sundown. The first obstacle is the reef itself, a jagged band of coral that turns every landing into a gamble. The assault engineers press baits, beaching ramps, and LVTs onto the shallows. A Caterpillar D7 bulldozer, nose caked with coral dust, rumbles ashore on a pontoon. The operator, Petty Officer Luis Mendez, leaning forward like a man who trusts machines more than luck. Behind him, other machines cough onto the beach, scrapers, graders, a clatter of jeeps and half-tracks. Everything that can move has been crammed into LSTs and floated across thousands of miles because the mission now is not merely to hold the atoll, but to make it flyable. By mid-morning, the Seabees are working in a theater of violence and improvisation. A Navy lieutenant is shouting over the buzz of a generator while a survey crew stakes out a crude runway line with bamboo poles and white paint. They are racing the tide of events, not just against the enemy, but against a timetable dictated by planes in flight and commanders at distant breaking points. Bombed-out craters and shell-raked scrub must be leveled. Swamp must be filled. Coral must be crushed and laid out like shingle to take the weight of an incoming B-24 or F-4F. It is here that the Marston mat, pierced steel planking, comes into the story. Rolls of this lugged metal clatter off an LST and into the hands of men who have never seen their like in the jungle. Each plate is stamped with ovals and holes. Together they will form the rigid skin of a runway that, once interlocked, will take off and land aircraft in hours, not months. The men are sweaty, hands raw from the repeated clanging of mallets. They work with a cadence as precise as a drill. The mat is heavy, but when fitted side by side it sings structural confidence, a flexible argument against mud and coral. Meanwhile, the Japanese on the island cannot believe what they watch. From the palm lines, Lieutenant Sakamoto sees bulldozers like armored insects crawl over hills that should have been impossible to cross. He watches his men try to harass the newcomers with sporadic mortar fire, only to find bulldozers turning craters into graded surfaces hours after the blasts fell. Where his patrols expected to delay, they find the soil smooth, the obstacles removed. The scale of the American effort is not merely in soldiers and ammunition. It is in the industrial appetite to replace what was destroyed faster than it can be destroyed. And there is a craft to it. The Seabees do not merely dump equipment and hope for the best. Hargrove directs graders to funnel water from a swamped lagoon into improvised ditches, then instructs men to mix coral fill with crushed coconut shell to create a firm base. Heavy rollers, salvaged from civilian road crews back in the States, pound the tract until it resists the imprint of a boot. When the first panels of Marston mat are aligned and bolted down, a hush falls for a moment among the Americans, as if the island itself is being stitched together. Above them, aviation squadrons that had been hungrier than most watch with thin, professional smiles. Lieutenant Commander Joseph Joe Whitaker, commander of a carrier squadron, radios in. Seabees report green strip construction ETA 6 hours. The voice on the beach whoops. 6 hours. For a man like Sakamoto, and for his fellow Japanese soldiers hiding in the roots of palm trees, the idea that a strip of steel could appear where jungle had been is not just surprising. It is incomprehensible. As the sun slants toward late afternoon, planes begin to taxi in a ragged line to test the new surface. The first touch, a twin-engine bomber's rolling shutter, reverberates through the bones of the island. The noise is different from the earlier cries of battle. It is mechanical, triumphant. Japanese men who have watched the world turn on their atoll for years squint, grip their rifles, and realize they are no longer watching a simple amphibious raid. They are watching an assembly line of liberation, or, from their point of view, of annihilation. On the beach, Hargrove finally allows himself a breath. He does not celebrate out loud. The work is never done. But he watches his men lay the last panel in the first stretch and thinks of the pilots who will need this runway by dawn. He knows the island will hum with a new music soon. The synchronized clack of wheels, the yaw of propellers, the steady exhale of aircraft that no longer need carriers to reach enemy lines. Lieutenant Sakamoto wipes sweat from his brow and looks inland at the blackened stumps of the palm trees. His mouth tightens. Where he had planned to fight for every path, he now sees steel where there was once only green. The Seabees are not just building a runway. They are undoing his geography, and in doing so they are rewriting the rules of war on these tiny coral islands. By dawn on February 23rd, the island no longer sounds like war. It sounds like industry. Diesel coughs, metal clanks, and the shrill whine of saws echo through the palms. Smoke still hangs in the humid air, but it smells not of battle now. It smells of oil, hot steel, and the churn of labor. Chief Hargrove stands knee-deep in coral dust, clipboard clutched under one arm, shouting over the racket of engines. His men, some in ragged uniforms, others shirtless and slick with sweat, move with the rhythm of an assembly line. One team lays out steel matting. Another drags crushed coral fill from the lagoon. Another keeps the bulldozers fueled and the water pumps running. The sun rises fast here, heavy and blinding, and it turns the airfield in progress into a shimmering mirage of motion and grit. Keep it level, Hargrove barks. If she isn't flat, that bomber's gonna skip like a rock. A young Seabee named Tom Driscoll laughs through his exhaustion. Chief, after this, the Navy ought to build highways across the ocean. Hargrove doesn't look up. Son, that's exactly what we're doing. To the Seabees, this is not just construction. It's combat in another form. Snipers still lurk in the jungle, taking shots at workers from the tree line. Mortars occasionally thump from unseen foxholes. But the men refuse to halt. They build through gunfire. Bulldozers keep crawling forward even as bullets spark off their steel blades. The drivers, protected only by sandbags piled around their seats, push on, their faces blank, eyes fixed ahead. In the command post, Lieutenant Commander Whitaker watches through binoculars. They're laying steel in a war zone, he mutters. Who does that? A Marine beside him answers quietly. Men who don't have time to stop dying before they start building. At the northern ridge, Lieutenant Sakamoto crawls through the brush, studying the Americans through a cracked field glass. He cannot understand their speed. 2 days ago, this shore was a swamp of broken palms and shell craters. Now, where his patrols once crouched, gleaming strips of metal glint in the sun. He can already make out the faint white lines of a runway taking shape. He sees the bulldozers, vast, yellow beasts, gouging through the coral and leveling ground faster than men could dig trenches. They are unstoppable, mechanical gods grinding the earth into order. Sakamoto mutters to his sergeant, "They are not soldiers. They are engineers of chaos." The sergeant swallows hard. "Sir, they fight the jungle as if it were the enemy." Sakamoto lowers the glass, eyes narrowing. Perhaps it is. The pace of work borders on the impossible. A temporary fuel line snakes from the beach up to a row of drums. Bulldozers plow through a grove of coconut palms, leaving behind stumps that smell of burnt sugar. Electricians run cable reels for portable lighting, floodlamps that bathe the site in white glare after sunset. It's war by floodlight, and it never stops. A group of Seabees nicknamed the Coral Crushers work around the clock to grind local rock into powder. The dust turns their skin ghostly white. When night falls, they sleep beside their machines, curled under the sound of generators and the constant hammer of rivets. They don't complain, not because they aren't tired, but because every man knows what's coming. B-24 Liberators, Hellcats, Corsairs. The sky needs a home, and they're building it out of mud and steel. On the third night, as rain begins to fall, the first plane touches down, a reconnaissance PBY Catalina. Its floats kiss the steel mat and skid to a halt, scattering droplets in the harsh light. The Seabees erupt in cheers, their helmets clattering against each other. Hargrove just smiles faintly and scribbles in his logbook. Runway operational. 72 hours from landing. From their hiding places, the Japanese soldiers can only watch. Their trenches are filled with water now, and their radio contact with command has gone silent. Sakamoto stares out at the glowing white strip through the rain. The runway stretches across what was once his defensive zone. He remembers how long it had taken his own engineers to carve a supply path through the jungle. Months of hacking and hauling under constant heat. The Americans did in 3 days what would have taken his army 3 seasons. The rain hides the look on his face, but his voice is quiet when he finally says, "Speed is their weapon." By the 4th morning, American planes are taking off every hour. Bombers roar overhead, heading for new targets beyond the horizon. The jungle hums with the sound of engines instead of cicadas. Seabees and Marines share black coffee in dented tin cups, their hands trembling from fatigue. Hargrove, grease-streaked and hollow-eyed, stands at the runway's edge watching another flight lift into the blazing Pacific sky. He turns to his crew and says, "Boys, this island just became a fortress." And though they laugh and cheer, none of them quite understand the full weight of what they've done, not yet. Across the ocean, generals in Washington and admirals in Pearl Harbor will soon point to Inuiatak on a map and circle it in red ink. It's proof of something bigger than a single victory. It's proof that America's war machine doesn't just fight. It builds. February 25, 1944. 3 days since the first Seabee boots hit the coral. The island that once reeked of smoke and decay now hums like a factory floor. B-24s crouch on the runway in gleaming rows, their noses painted with shark teeth and pinups. Mechanics scurry between them with wrenches, grease guns, and fuel hoses that hiss like serpents. Beyond the airstrip, the jungle still smolders in patches, and Japanese snipers still take desperate shots from the tree line, but it no longer matters. The heart of the island beats in steel. Chief Hargrove stands on the edge of the strip, his uniform dark with oil and rain. Beside him, a lieutenant from the 4th Marine Division passes a canteen and nods toward the sky. "Hard to believe, Chief. 48 hours ago, this was just mud and palm stumps." Hargrove smirks, rubbing coral dust from his neck. "Sir, with enough diesel and steel matting, we could build a base on the moon." He's half joking, but the idea isn't far from the truth. Every new Seabee airfield, Tarawa, Kwajalein, now Inuiatak, shortens the Pacific, shrinking thousands of miles of ocean into a series of hopscotch steps toward Japan. Each base built faster than the last. Each island turned from jungle to launch pad in less than a week. The Japanese know it, too. Hidden deep in the North Ridge, Lieutenant Sakamoto writes his final report by the light of a dying lantern. His unit has been reduced to a handful of men, starving and feverish. The sound of engines never stops. The drone of bombers taking off at dawn, the returning thunder at dusk. He writes slowly, carefully, as if the act itself might slow the inevitable. Enemy construction ability exceeds all expectations. They build airfields in days, not months. Their machines operate without pause. The earth itself seems to yield to their command. He pauses, hearing the rhythmic boom of departing aircraft, and underlines the last line. Then he folds the message into his uniform pocket, not because he thinks it will reach anyone, but because he wants someone, someday, to know what they saw here. Meanwhile, the Seabees keep going. They don't stop at the first runway. Now they're building fuel dumps, radar stations, barracks, even a small chapel cobbled together from packing crates and palm trunks. At night, the men sleep under mosquito nets strung between bulldozers. When they wake, their faces are streaked with soot and coral dust, their ears ringing from the unending drone of generators. Yet the energy never fades. They know every plank and steel mat laid here is a step closer to ending the war. Hargrove's men talk sometimes about home, about families who don't even know where they are. But mostly they talk about the work, the pride in it, the madness of it. Driscoll, the youngest of the crew, says one night, "Chief, I heard the Japs used to say no one could tame these islands." Hargrove looks up from his coffee, smiling through exhaustion. "Then I guess we're proving him wrong, one bulldozer at a time." By early March, Inuitaq's airfield is fully operational. Flights roar in and out carrying supplies, mail, and wounded men. It's become the staging ground for the next leap toward the Marianas. Commanders marvel at the speed. The Navy expected months, but the Seabees did it in 5 days flat. Newspapers back home will later call it a miracle of steel and sweat. For the Japanese defenders who survive long enough to witness it, it is something else entirely, a revelation of defeat. The jungle that once protected them now lies open and flat, a perfect surface for their enemies' wings. The ocean that once isolated them has turned into an American highway. Lieutenant Sakamoto is captured a week later, his uniform tattered, his face hollow. When questioned, he speaks little, but one translator notes a phrase he repeats several times. They built the sky. On March 4th, a final ceremony takes place on the edge of the completed runway. The Seabees line up beside their machines, bulldozers, graders, cranes, as if they were soldiers too. A Navy chaplain blesses the field while AP-47 thunders overhead in salute. Chief Hargrove stands at attention, helmet tucked under his arm, eyes squinting against the sun. He's not thinking of medals or speeches. He's thinking of the next island, Saipan, Tinian, Guam, each waiting, somewhere out there beyond the horizon, to be remade. When the ceremony ends, he lights a cigarette and turns back toward the beach. "Pack it up, boys," he says. "We've got more ocean to pave." The men laugh. The engines start again. And as the bombers rise into the golden Pacific sky, the island hums, not with war, but with creation. A new kind of warfare, born from blueprints and bulldozers, has begun to reshape the Pacific one coral speck at a time. The Japanese soldiers who once ruled these islands now look on in silent disbelief. Because in this war, it isn't just who can destroy the fastest, it's who can build faster than the enemy can destroy. The Seabees have proven their answer.